1012, and it gives me 1,250 feet. Texas.
Announced the arrival of the flight from Los Angeles and Chicago.
Explosion.
Alrighty, welcome everybody to this Wednesday, May 25th, 2016 edition of TNZ Talk. And man, do we have plenty to talk about today. I am the T in TNZ. Joining me now is the Z in TNZ, Richard Zombeck, the unpaid, incredibly gifted writer for the Huffington Post, and the paid writer at Liberals Unite. We actually want to tip our hat to Liberals Unite because they actually pay you.
Yeah, I actually get a cut of the advertising. We're also starting a new site called Art of Living, which will be more, actually I shouldn't say more, it'll be less politics.
Right, and it'll be more pop culture, more cultural stuff, which I'm very much looking forward to enjoying. Z, you know, we had made a commitment yesterday to be much more upfront about the importance of people going to the Patreon page and making a donation to the show and to start to support it financially. We're not getting any hits on that, but we're not going to give up on that effort. And so, you know, we are making a commitment at the top of every show to ask people, we're not begging you, of course, but we're asking you to support us financially. Certainly, there's no reason, Z, people can't go to iTunes and rank us and make a comment. You know, all of these things collectively help us become more successful. And as you and I were talking right just before we started to record, our numbers have doubled and continue to increase. And so there's no reason to believe that we can't make this work financially, but we need help to make that happen.
Yeah, it's a gig economy, and it's a outsource economy, and it's a crowdsource economy. I mean, this is kind of the economy we live in. You know, it's like yesterday you were talking about menial labor, and not in a disparaging way, and I get exactly what you were saying. And I think, you know, most of the people that listen to us are probably close to or our age and in the same situation. And going out and working in a kitchen like you're doing, or considering painting houses. I actually was looking up Amazon delivery trucks, and you need your own vehicle. They pay about $11 an hour, and the vehicle that I have is a vehicle that I used to get to work when I was working about 30 miles from here. So I've got 116,000 miles on a 2009. Just to give you an example, my father has a 1993 Honda Accord that has 116,000 miles on it. Mine's a 2009, and it's got 116,000 miles on it because I was driving 2 to 3 hours a day to work and back every day when I was a technical writer, working way outside of Boston, and I live on the North Shore. And that's where we're living. But, you know, I'd like to think that we're informing people, we're giving them some information, some stuff that they can talk about, and you know, maybe enlightening them a little bit about what's going on out in the world. And, you know, what I like about the podcast is that, you know, you can listen to it anywhere, on your way to work, at the gym, on the train. That's why we do a podcast.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and give them the information they need in order to support us.
Yeah, it's at tnztalk.com, and you can click on the support link and find out all the ways that you can support us financially. You can go to our Patreon page, and, of course, by rating us and reviewing us on iTunes is a big help. It helps iTunes show that we're getting listeners and followers, and, of course, subscribing to the podcast in iTunes helps a lot. And if you want to contact us, you can click on the contact link, and you'll find a form there that you can email us, or, excuse me, you can call and leave us a voicemail at 559-898-2551. That's 559-TZ-TALK-1.
All right. Well, let's get to some really, I think, important topics this morning, and I want to start with Donald Trump very, very briefly. And really easy. I don't want to spend more than 3 or 4 minutes on him this morning, except in other critical areas. But he was in New Mexico yesterday, and there were over 1,000 protesters that got very violent. And these were anti-Trump people. Listen, I don't condone violence, and they actually went after the police at one point. But it's indicative of a mindset, and that's why I bring it up.
Yeah, it was crazy. I mean, smoke and people running in the streets, and it really looked like it looked like something that, some of the footage we saw in Egypt and the Middle East during the what was it there?
The Arab Spring, right? Well, and anyway, it's indicative of mindset. We have plenty to discuss with or about Donald Trump today. I want to start, and this is actually going to steamroll into another topic, but let's start with Elizabeth Warren. And I just want to, if you would, play the audio of Donald Trump calling Elizabeth Warren a particular name, and then what he says afterwards, because I think that sets up what we're going to play from her quite nicely.
Okay.
I looked, Hillary Clinton has somebody. Did you ever hear Pocahontas? Huh? It's Pocahontas, Elizabeth Warren. She was going out. She is probably the senator that's doing just about the least in the United States Senate. She's a total failure. She said she was an Indian. She said because her cheekbones were high, she was an Indian, that she was Native American. And, we have these surrogates, people like her, total failures. And I'll tell you what, our country is getting wise to what's happening, folks. We're getting wise to what's happening. It's a big scam, and we're all being scammed together, and we're not going to take it anymore, okay? We're not going to take it anymore.
Oh, okay. We're not going to take it anymore, Z.
She's got others. Let me tell you, if this group ever gets into the White House again, we're not going to have a country.
Yeah.
What an ass. I mean, he's just a complete and utter ass. And you wonder why there are protests? I don't wonder. Pocahontas, do you find that a bit racist?
Well, yeah, and it's a little pot calling the kettle black, right? Ooh. I mean, a con man, what is it, takes a thief, right? So, he's talking about con men and scammers, and, coming from the source, it seems to make a lot of sense, right?
Unfortunately. Well, Elizabeth Warren, of course, responds, not necessarily to that comment, but to Donald Trump in general. And let me just say this, Z, before we play the audio, and you feel free to comment as well. I do not believe Elizabeth Warren will be the vice presidential candidate, not because she wouldn't be great, and for a lot of reasons, I could tell you why she would be perfect. I think they need her in the Senate. I think they need her as a surrogate, and I think she's going to serve the campaign better in this role. Just my thoughts, and feel free to comment and then play the audio.
Yeah, I think it goes along the same theory of when they had Run Warren Run, right? When that whole they were trying to draft her. MoveOn.org was trying to draft her, and her job is not done, and she needs to be a big voice in the Senate. And I was actually really surprised that they put her on the banking committee, that the Republicans allowed that, because she is. I mean, if anyone in the Senate, in Congress, is protecting us, is defending us, is working in our best interest, it's people like Elizabeth Warren. I can't say it's just Elizabeth Warren, because there are there are a handful of very good Democrats that are looking out for our best interest, with payday loans, with Wall Street, with mortgages, with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and that is being hammered by the Republicans who are on the Wall Street and corporate payroll, who are really in Congress to do nothing more than serve big interest and particularly the banks.
Yeah, and we're going to come back to that in just a few minutes. But let's play that audio before we get to that topic.
Okay.
Unfortunately, if you've been watching the presidential race, you know that we need to stand up now more than ever. Just yesterday, it came out that Donald Trump had said back in 2007, that is the year before the Estradas lost their home, that he was, quote, excited for the real estate market to crash because, quote, I've always made more money in bad markets than good. That's right. The rest of us were horrified by what happened during the 2008 financial crisis, by what happened to millions of families like Mr. Estrada's that were forced out of their homes. But Donald Trump was drooling over the idea of a housing meltdown because it meant he could buy up more property on the cheap. What kind of a man does that? What kind of a man roots for people to get thrown out of their house? What kind of man roots for people to get thrown out of their jobs, to root for people to lose their pensions, to root for two little girls in Clark County, Nevada, to end up living out of a van? What kind of a man does that? I'll tell you exactly what kind of a man does that. It is a man who cares about no one but himself. A small, insecure money grubber who doesn't care who gets hurt so long as he makes a profit off it. What kind of a man does that? A man who will never be president of the United States. Now, sometimes Trump claims that he is tough on Wall Street, tough on the guys who cheated people like Mr. Estrada. You may have heard him say that. But now, he's singing a very different song. Last week, he said that the new Dodd-Frank financial regulations have, and I'm going to quote here, made it impossible for bankers to function. And he will put out a new plan soon that, quote, will be close to dismantling Dodd-Frank. Donald Trump is worried about helping poor little Wall Street. Let me find the world's smallest violin to play a sad, sad song.
Her sarcasm is just refreshing.
Well, you know what's really interesting, and I didn't have and we wouldn't have been able to play the entire 15 minutes. Perhaps we can post it unless you already did. But I think that people need to understand that her remarks are not just meant to be spears. They're meant to really, and maybe over-exaggerate, but I'm okay with that, the reality of what a Trump candidacy/presidency would mean. This man is not mentally stable, and people aren't waking up to that reality yet.
Well, and I think that's where one of the HuffPost editors, I can't remember his name right now, was on last night. I think it was on, it might have been on Chris Hayes or Chris Matthews. But that's what he said, is they have to go after his mental imbalance and just show him to be the complete nut job that he is. And, I don't know how that's going to work with his followers, but it certainly should work. I mean, it's getting kind of scary when you look at poll numbers. And again, you and I have talked about poll numbers a lot, but it's getting kind of scary.
Yeah, it is, and again, I know that things will change. I know that they will move. And I know a lot of things. It'll be, and before we get into some of the other anti-Trump stuff that we've got this morning. And there's some important stuff. Jake Tapper from CNN went after Donald Trump, and we're going to play the audio of Donald Trump bringing up Bill Clinton's past. And I want to remind, we'll get to that. But you had told me something before the show about banks and about a lawsuit. And I think this is something that's critically important for people to pay attention to. And I'm going to bet that they're not going to hear this anywhere else but here.
Well, yeah. And I mean, it's certainly not on the media. It's not hitting a lot of the big, although The Guardian did carry a story about it. But a few years ago, back in 2013, as a result of the financial crisis, a couple of cities in the United States, including Baltimore, San Diego, and Houston, sued the 16 banks, the 16 largest big banks, for their involvement in the LIBOR scandal. Something that I wrote about, and I'll get to the definition of that. I wrote about several times on Huffington Post, and also if you go to Move Your Money on Facebook, you can find a lot of information about that. But what the LIBOR essentially is, it's LIBOR, and it's the London Interbank Offering Rate. And what that is it determines what our interest rates are. So whether you have a mortgage, a school loan, any kind of loan, the rate at which your interest is determined by the LIBOR. And if you have an adjustable rate income, that's also determined by the LIBOR. And other things that are also determined by the LIBOR are, for example, municipal bonds. So when the LIBOR goes up, the municipal bonds price and rating goes down, and vice versa. And how that number is determined is supposed to be mathematical. The 16 banks call in every day and tell their interest rate, and then an average is taken of that, and that's the LIBOR rate for the day. And if you look at any of your loan papers, you'll see that your interest rate is in fact attached to the LIBOR. As it turns out, these banks were not doing mathematical equations at all. They were calling in with arbitrary numbers based on what they were betting on that day. So if they bought a ton of municipal bonds, they would lower the LIBOR index, sell their municipal bonds off at a massive profit, and then raise the LIBOR the next day so that people couldn't sell back at the same price. This is the kind of manipulation that's been going on for decades. They were taken to court. A lower court determined that they had not proven significant fraud, which meant that the plaintiffs couldn't prove damages. The case was appealed and is now going back in front of a new court and hearing and trial. These are banks like Barclays, Bank of America, Deutsche Bank, HSBC, UBS, all the 16 banks that were involved in this, Deutsche Bank. And over the course of the last few years, there have been penalties like $2.5 billion in penalties, $9 billion, $2.5 billion against Deutsche Bank, and 3-judge appellate court panel disagreed with the decision of the lower court. So this is going back to court. If it wins, if the case wins, Tony, it could bankrupt the 16 banks. Because what happens in the case of fraud is that plaintiffs are granted treble damages, which means triple the amount of what they lost in the case of fraud. In the case of fraud, we could be talking about trillions of dollars. And I've posted the article from The Guardian on our Facebook page. You can find it there. I'll post a link to it in the show notes. But this is pretty big. And it's big. It's significant also because it could crash the economy, and therefore the ruling could favor the banks simply because of that, which also means that our justice system isn't working properly.
Let me ask you a quick question. Before the show, you said chances are that the banks would lose this case. But would the judges understand? Well, they would understand. Would they take into effect whether it would be part of the legal proceedings or not, what it would do to the economy, and ergo, perhaps decide in favor of the banks or to manipulate the judgment so that it would not be as hard a hit on the economy as you suggest, and I believe it would be?
Well, actually, what I said was that they would probably lose, and I was referring to the plaintiffs because of what it would do to the economy. I think that the judge, or if it goes to jury trial, it could be a different story. But because of what it might do to the economy, we could not get a fair ruling on this, right? And that's the problem that has come up time and time again. I mean, we've seen literally no one go to jail over the financial crisis. And prior to that, with the savings and loan debacle, there were over 1,000 bankers and investors and hedge fund managers that went to jail, thanks to William Black, who was the regulator at the time. But right now, we have a very weak regulatory system that's unwilling to punish the big banks because they essentially take us hostage. I mean, Jamie Dimon is famous for essentially coming out and saying, hey, nice little economy you have here. It'd be a shame if something happened to it. So this is where we are. We're back to too big to fail. Donald Trump wants to get rid of Frank Dodd. We no longer have Glass-Steagall. We have no protection, and the banks have all the protection, and they're allowed to run roughshod over the economy and consumers.
All right. Well, and again, we have so much to get to today, but I want to thank you for giving us an understandable way to look at this. And I do want to encourage people to go to just T&Z, T&Z, just put it into a search engine on Facebook, and you'll find us. And you can read all about it then.
And one thing I want to say quickly is because a lot of people think that they're not affected by this, that it's high finance, that it has very little to do with their lives. But here's the thing: is if you have a loan, any loan, credit card, student loan, debit card, interest rate with your bank, that you're in savings, CDs. Anything, any kind of financial device at all, they were taking trillions of dollars out of people's pockets every month.
Well,
fraudulently.
Yeah, fraudulently is the important thing. All right. Well, we had referenced a little earlier Bill Clinton, or I should say Donald Trump bringing up Bill Clinton in the 90s. And the point I want to make before we play the audio and of Donald Trump and then Jake Tapper from CNN is that the whole Vince Foster thing, and I'm not going to get into the whole case now because if you don't know about it by now, go Google it, Vince Foster. But the reality is that was investigated by Ken Starr. And Ken Starr, as Jake Tapper points out, was no fan of Bill Clinton. And if there was any impropriety, any connection, Ken Starr would have found it. With that said, Donald Trump decides this weekend that I guess he's running against Bill Clinton, right, Z?
Yeah. And funny you should mention Ken Starr. I don't know if you caught this, but Ken Starr is involved now in his own sexual scandal.
I did not see that, but let's come back to that after we play both Donald Trump, and then we'll comment quickly and listen to Jake Tapper.
So you want the Trump ad, right?
Yeah. Well, no. The new Trump depicting Bill Clinton as a rapist.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I was very nervous.
No woman should be subjected to it. It was an assault.
He starts to bite on my top lip, and I try to pull away from him.
Yeah, so that was an ad that he played over the weekend on Instagram. Tony?
Well, obviously it wasn't his decision, but that's okay. It goes to dysfunction. Jake Tapper, amongst many other members of the media, were, I don't know, I want to say disappointed that this happened. But Jake Tapper was the only one that actually stood up and really initially called this for what it was. So let's listen to what Jake Tapper had to say. Or not.
Well, it's just a lot of
noise. All right. Well, we won't worry about it. So I'll tell you what Jake Tapper had to say. Jake Tapper had to say that it was shameful what Donald Trump did, and that once again, when it comes to the truth, it seems to be eluding Donald Trump. Now, he was very careful, and I thought eloquent in his statement that this wasn't about being pro or anti-Donald Trump. It's about being pro-truth. And he couldn't be more right. It really is about pro-truth. And, you know, interestingly, and maybe we'll get to another piece of audio here that you captured the other day. It's titled, Trump Advisor Gets Laughed Off CNN. And I think that this, again, is indicative of the kind of people that Donald Trump is surrounding himself with, see?
Yeah. Well, I mean, they are, they're basically giving him, what he wants and towing the line, right? And this is happening, over and over and over again with the people that it's happening with Republicans as well. And so Trump says whatever the hell he wants, and then the rest of them scramble to kind of go, well, yeah, and, you know, there's some truth to that. And this guy, I can't remember his name, but he's completely enamored by Donald Trump and just about everything he says. So, yeah, dude, let's play that.
I want to talk about the Second Amendment because Donald Trump continues to say that Hillary Clinton wants to abolish the Second Amendment. That is false. That is false by every fact check, by her, by the campaign, by everyone who's listening, but Donald Trump. Why does he continue to say that?
Because it's true.
She's never said that.
Oh, come on.
She's never even intimated that.
I think that a lot of people at this table have a different view about what the Second Amendment means. The D.C. versus Heller decision upheld an individual right to keep and bear arms. The Second Amendment no longer exists when we consider it an individual privilege, but a government right. So when Hillary Clinton is saying she wants to overturn D.C. versus Heller, she is by definition saying she wants to abolish the Second Amendment.
I'm sorry, but wait a second. That ignores all constitutional decisions up until the point of D.C. versus Heller, which, by the way, was the majority of constitutionalism up until that point. And even Justice Scalia, before he passed, said that the Second Amendment has its limitations. And again, before Heller, we did not hold that the Second Amendment equals the right of individuals to bear unlimited arms with no regulations.
I'm glad you made this point because it shows the disagreement.
You want to uphold the tradition of the Second Amendment in this country.
Your Second Amendment
abolish
is not
it.
the Second Amendment the rest of us know.
What you have in this race right now is something really extraordinary. You have the presumptive Republican nominee tacking to the far right to shore up the conservative part of the base of his party instead of running to the right in the primary and then tacking towards the general. It's extraordinary that for an issue that actually Americans have there's a consensus about gun rights for the most part. I mean, 90% of Americans, upwards of, certainly over 85%, want some sort of gun restriction, increased gun restrictions. But they also value the Second Amendment. There's a lot of commonality. There's a lot of common ground on what we can do in terms of the Second Amendment. Nobody's arguing to take it away. We all know that. I mean, it takes Stephen getting on to explain that when he says abolish the Second Amendment, what he really means is overturning Heller by means of a Supreme Court.
That was in his remarks today. But I want to...
By means of a Supreme Court.
But again,
the point is he's running in the general election now. So by putting out the justices a couple of days ago, the kind of people he would appoint to the Supreme Court, by picking a Second Amendment fight with Hillary Clinton, all of these things, what they don't go towards getting all the votes that Mitt Romney won plus. You got to win these independent voters in these 35 counties and these 7 swing states across the country if you're going to win the general election. We all know that. And so you have to tack towards the center and be a unifier on these issues that independents agree on, while also being consistent with the party and the ideas that got you nominated in the first place. And that's not what Donald Trump's doing at all.
Go ahead. or are you just speechless? Listen, the laughter was real. It was sincere. It wasn't a laugh track. This idea that we can manipulate our arguments based on a court case that clearly did not say that the Second Amendment could be abolished, number one. Number two, as they point out, even the very conservative, now departed Antonin Scalia, former Supreme Court Justice, agreed that the Second Amendment has limits. But, let's just ignore the facts.
Well, yeah, I mean, why not? And I don't know what the mindset of Trump followers is really, but it appears to be it doesn't matter that he doesn't tell the truth. He's just saying this to win, and we need him to win, and he needs to win at all costs. And the politicos that are getting behind him seem to just be acquiescing, hoping that they'll be able to curry his favor. I mean, it really is like the emperor has no clothes.
Or,
it's just
whoring yourself for political gain.
Yeah, which I'm not even sure which one is more disgusting at this point.
Why should we differentiate them? Let them both stand. Seriously, let them both stand, Z. Listen, and I want you to, if you would, play the audio from the other day that we didn't get to on the former Fox contributor slamming the news networks for not vetting Donald Trump. Now, I will tell you that as I had MSNBC on in the background this morning, and unfortunately I didn't stop to take a look at who said it, but I think it was Bob Costas from the Washington Post, who is a conservative, who said, we are finally seeing the media vet Trump beyond the low-hanging fruit, beyond the insults, the misogyny, the racism, in getting deeper into his background. And as you and I know, and we have not discussed yet, to this point, based on the available information, Donald Trump doesn't pay taxes.
Right. And won't release his taxes.
Right. But let's not go there. He has not paid taxes. He does not, to our knowledge, contribute philanthropically. There are no organizations that are coming forward saying, oh, the Trump organization has given us millions of dollars.
Well, in fact, the vets are saying that his $6 million to veterans never got there.
Well, he released yesterday $1 million, but that's not 6, is it?
Right, but here's the thing, Tony, is that this is the problem. And I think they were talking about it this morning on Morning Joe also, is that he didn't pay any taxes. His followers are simply going to say, well, he's taking advantage of the tax code, like any good businessman would, and he's going to do the same thing for this country, right? Is he's kept all of his money, he's going to make sure that we keep all of ours.
All right, so here's the outrage, or where it should be. Mitt Romney paid only 15% of his considerable wealth in taxes. 15%. Now, again, based on the available information, Donald Trump has paid 0. The outrage over Mitt Romney's tax return may have cost him the election. Where's the outrage over Donald Trump?
Well, Mitt Romney wasn't a bombastic superstar reality TV show host that said he was going to build a wall and keep all the Mexicans out.
Well, okay, and I'm about to get really angry, so I'm just going to move on. Seriously, I am. I'm just going to freaking move on. I've had enough. I really, really had enough. But I do want to go to that piece of audio on the former Fox contributor, if you would, please.
Trump.
Yeah, this cottage industry you're describing, John, I think this is something that the Democrats, liberals, Clinton supporters get so immensely frustrated with. They feel like Clinton does not get a fair shake from general national media coverage because of these built-in biases. Yeah. Carl, do you subscribe to that journalists start out sort of assuming the worst about Hillary Clinton?
Well, I think you can't generalize about journalists' quote. I think you have to talk about real experienced political reporters who are really capable, like at the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, some of the cable networks, on a day-to-day basis. But I think we must come back, at the risk of being repetitive here. We are ahead of ourselves. We need to be seeing on television, the three networks, the old networks and the cable networks, we need to be seeing in-depth reporting about the lives of all of these candidates who are still running, and we need to see it soon. Because what we're doing is we're focusing on breaking news, underline, without going back and seeing, well, what is the context of what we're reporting here? Who are these people? We think we know them. I don't think that the voters do, because the voters haven't read the books that are out there that really tell us something about who these people are.
Well, you know, I think television has given Donald Trump pretty much a pass. The New York Times and Washington Post, they've done a lot about his business practices, his university. It's really because entertainment, you should pardon the expression, is trumping everything else, I think, largely on television. He calls in, he says what he wants, he's gone, he's out of town, and he's never called on what he's done, what he's said. It's really fairly extraordinary. Entertainment is the ultimate value, I think, in this campaign, at least on a lot of television.
It's also true of Bernie Sanders. We have not done a lot of reporting on Bernie Sanders and his life and what he's done.
Let me get a final take from John.
There's been plenty of reporting, but the self-segregation of people with regard to partisan media insulates themselves. So you're right. There needs to be more aggressive, holding them to account. But it's our job in the media, as well as people at home, to do basically two things right now. We need to call BS, and we need to make important stories interesting. If there's a shortfall, it's on us to ratchet up the accountability and reporting without fear or favor over the course of the next few months. That's on us.
That's on us.
You know what? That speaks for itself. I really just don't even think we need to take that any further. It speaks for itself. Listen, I did find the correct Jake Tapper audio, and if you wouldn't mind, I'd actually like to play that because I really liked what he had to say.
Once again, journalists are in the unhappy predicament of trying to decide whether and how to cover false allegations raised by a candidate for President of the United States. This time, in the midst of Donald Trump's attacks on the Clintons using various scandals and accusations from the 1990s, Mr. Trump has repeated an outrageous and long ago debunked falsehood about former Deputy White House counsel Vince Foster, a friend of Bill and Hillary Clinton's until his tragic suicide. In July 1993, Foster, who suffered from depression, drove to Fort Marcy Park in Virginia, walked into the park with an old revolver, and shot himself in the mouth. The Park Service police concluded that year that Foster committed suicide, but that did not stop conspiracy theorists at the time from concocting all sorts of unfounded allegations. Now, that first investigation was followed by an investigation by CNN in 1994 concluding Foster's death was due to suicide and that alternative scenarios had no credibility. Other investigations reached the same conclusion, one by independent counsel Robert Fisk in 1994, two by congressional reviews in 1994 and 1995, another by independent counsel Ken Starr in 1997. So one would think, case closed, right? Wrong. Donald Trump, in an interview appearing in today's Washington Post, called the circumstances surrounding Vince Foster's death, quote, very fishy, and said, I don't bring Foster's death up because I don't know enough to really discuss it. I will say there are people who continue to bring it up because they think it was absolutely a murder. I don't do that because I don't think it's fair, right? Except, of course, you just did that, Mr. Trump. You lent credence to a bizarre and unfounded conspiracy theory. Though you're right, it's not fair that you did that. Certainly not to Mr. Foster's widow or their 3 children. To be clear, the notion that this was a murder is a fiction born of delusion and untethered to reality and contradicted by evidence reviewed in at least 6 investigations, one of them by Ken Starr, hardly a Bill Clinton defender. To say otherwise is ridiculous and, frankly, shameful. Again, this is not a pro-Clinton position or an anti-Trump position. It is a pro-truth position.
Well, it's about effing time.
Yeah. And I thought it was beautifully, beautifully said. As our time is clicking away, and I want to get to the Debbie Wasserman Schultz stuff before we get out of here today, you've got some other audio you wanted to play, and so I'll let you go ahead and do that. Then we'll spend a little time talking about this whole BS after that.
Yeah, and this kind of falls on what Jake Tapper was saying, and this is actually from Fox News. Bill O'Reilly.
I think it was today on the internet, you put up some stuff about Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton. It's kind of tawdry stuff, and I'm not sure that this is a good thing to do that.
You're talking about what I'm doing? Well, I'm only responding to what they do. They've been nasty. She's been very nasty, and I said I'd like it to be on policy, Bill. I'd like it to be a straight right down the middle. And by the way, the one thing you didn't mention about the polls, number one, I am popular with people. I really do. And I think a lot of people that maybe say I'm not, they're going to still vote for me. But you didn't explain that I was winning in most of the polls now. I'm winning in the tracking polls, and I'm winning in most of the polls against Hillary.
But we did that on Thursday.
Which I think is maybe
we reported it first on Thursday.
A lot of people maybe didn't see that show.
No, everybody watches every night.
Some people might not have seen
No,
that.
they all saw it.
Okay, maybe you're right.
Every human being on Earth knows and saw that because it goes on the internet.
Okay.
And you tweeted about it, and everybody reads your tweets. So that's been out. But I understand what you're trying to do here is inhibit Mrs. Clinton from attacking you personally by saying, if you play that game, then I can come back 10 times harder. I understand that. But you know that it makes the country look bad abroad and things like that. That's what worries me. I mean, I understand the Clinton attack machine. I got it. And I think it has to be dealt with somewhat. But I think maybe caution.
Well, I don't like doing that. But I have no choice. When she hits me on things, I just have no choice. So you have to do it. It's unfair. And, you know, they're dirty players. They've been dirty players historically. And I have to fight back the way I have to fight back.
All right. And voters will make up their mind. As I said, if it's in context, everybody, I think, will understand it. But I hope you guys both you're right. I mean, it should be issues, right? You and her on the issues.
I would rather have policy and issues.
Yeah.
Much rather have policy and issues.
Yeah, I kind of doubt that because he has no policy and issues.
Yeah, but he'd much rather have that.
And, I mean, you know, granted, O'Reilly's, it was softball to a certain degree. I mean, he was kind of hesitating of saying, look, you're lying. And actually called him out on saying, yeah, no, everyone saw this. So don't tell me that we're not doing our jobs. I mean, the problem, Tony, is that it's a little too late for this.
What is the problem? I love it when you say that. The problem is, Tony, full-throated.
Is that this is a little too late. I mean,
I disagree. I disagree. I don't think it's too little too late. I think that we're beginning to see a ramp up of what we can expect post-conventions. I think that Donald Trump is going to be hit. You don't think that there are literally hundreds of people doing Oppo research on him right now? You don't think they're holding back information, waiting for the general? You don't think they're going to inundate him with his past? They're going to beat the living F out of him, dude.
Oh, I completely agree, Tony. But had they started doing this earlier, we wouldn't have him as a nominee.
Well, I don't disagree with that. I don't disagree with that. Listen,
they coddled him. They lavished praise on him. They gave him everything for this to happen. And now they're saying, oh, well, we must have missed some things because turns out you're a giant douche.
Well, the biggest hypocrites are Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski, who really, literally talk behind his back, and then when they have him on, they kiss his ass.
Oh, completely.
Calling him Donald.
Not so much Mika.
I don't know. She, when he puts the screws to her, she backs right down when he's on the show.
I'll give you that.
Well, anyway. Listen, we've got about 12 minutes left, and I want to get to this Debbie Wasserman Schultz story that's out there right now, because it's big. It's huge, actually. But I want to share with you an article I just got from the New York Times, part of my news feed. I'm sorry, from the LA Times. You're going to love this one. As if Bernie Sanders doesn't have enough problems right now. As if the campaign isn't experiencing a great deal of angst. As if those that that were on board with Sanders, that are walking away because of the curmudgeony feel of the campaign now, haven't had enough. The Socialist Party has now come out with their disfavor for Bernie Sanders because he's abandoned his core values. Can you imagine? Seriously, dude, can you imagine? They're calling, you ready for this? Because you're going to love this language. They're calling Bernie Sanders a sellout.
And the hits just keep getting better. We'll bring them to you here on TNZ Talk.
Absolutely. All right, so the scuttlebutt is that the well-placed operatives within the Democratic Party say that many leaders of the Democratic Party, both in the House and the Senate, are seriously considering replacing Debbie Wasserman Schultz as the chairperson of the Democratic National Committee before the convention. Let's get to some quick audio, and it is real quick, and then we'll come back and talk about this.
Democrats on Capitol Hill are discussing the possibility of DNC chairwoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz stepping down before the party's national convention in July. Those who are backing Hillary Clinton are concerned that Wasserman Schultz has divided the party too much to overcome Donald Trump in November. And some argue that she has favored Hillary Clinton over Bernie Sanders. The lawmakers said senators huddled on the chamber floor last week to talk about Wasserman Schultz's future, and estimated that about a dozen have weighed in during private conversations.
There we go. Now,
dun, dun, dun.
Just your reaction. Let me just start there. Your reaction.
Yeah, let her go.
Well, come on.
Let
you
her
got to do more than you got to do
let
more.
Her go.
You got to do more than that. Come on.
I don't have to. Yeah, she needs to go, Tony. I mean, she has. She's been very divisive. She has not been unbiased at all to two very important candidates running in the primaries.
Well, and you and I discussed that at length yesterday, and we both agreed that she should have been removed months ago. Now, having read a couple articles, it confirmed a couple things that we said yesterday. Number one, President Obama has a direct say in who the chair of the DNC is. So ultimately, it will be his decision. She does have her fair share of well-named supporters within the Democratic Party still. And so I believe that if they do replace her, and I believe they should, but I believe if they do, whoever they replace her with, needs to be somebody that is extremely progressive and very temporary. Because the reality is, when the nominee, the Democratic nominee, wins the White House, and they will, that they will have an opportunity, of course, to appoint their own DNC chair. Now, you and I are both fully aware of the reality that presents itself at this point in the campaign and replacing the chair who really has been orchestrating the actual event, if you will, for a couple years now. This is not something that happens in a couple months. So will the disruption, and it's, I think, a fair question, will the disruption cause more chaos, or would it help to heal the party? And I don't know that I have the answer to that, to be honest with you, Z.
Yeah, I don't either. But you know, here's a couple other things too. Is she has some competition in her own home state. Bernie Sanders is endorsing the candidate who will be running against her. And something that kind of ticks me off in particular is she has basically slapped the face of Elizabeth Warren and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau by allowing payday lenders to rip off people for another 2 or 3 years in her home state. Something that the CFPB has been trying to put regulations on, these payday lenders who literally have 1,000 to 2,000% interest on loans. And the CFPB has been trying to reel them in. And Debbie Wasserman Schultz has basically flipped the bird, given a giant FU to Elizabeth Warren, to consumer protection agencies and the CFPB, and allowed payday lenders, because of the campaign contributions that she receives from them, to continue to rip off people for another 2, 3, possibly 5 years.
Can you, ladies and gentlemen, tell the topics that Richard Zombeck has incredible knowledge of? He starts talking faster and louder and with great authority, and I love when you do that, dude. I absolutely love it.
Well, you got a little hot earlier, and I get really hot when it's okay to rip people off. I mean, I know we're running short on time, but let me give you a very short example. Okay, several years ago, as part of Dodd-Frank, they wanted to eliminate the 27 and 28% interest rates on credit cards that credit cards were allowed to charge based on, you want to think it's your credit history, but based on whatever they want. If you were late by 3 minutes making your payment, your interest rate would go up to 27 or 28%. The CFPB, led by Elizabeth Warren, and part of the Dodd-Frank, wanted to limit that to a maximum of 13% that they could raise it to. The Republicans were outraged. The right was outraged, right? Now, the whole thing is that you give a little give and take when you're discussing this kind of thing. Do you know what the give and take was, Tony? They settled on 25%. So, credit cards can arbitrarily send you a letter and say, oh, by the way, that 10% that you were paying for the last year, you were late on your last payment by 3 minutes. Your interest rate is going up to 25%. And that's retroactive on the money you owe, by the way.
All right, very quickly, before we have to get out of here today, we've got some audio from Michigan Congressman Dan Kildee that we'll get to tomorrow. And it's important because it deals with the people of Flint and the Republican obstructionism that is keeping that city from healing. But we'll get to that tomorrow. I did want to give you an update, though, and give you an opportunity to quickly respond. The Detroit Free Press this morning broke a story that Rick Snyder, the governor of Michigan, is literally spending $6,500 a day on lawyers. The state of Michigan is paying that tab. The taxpayers are paying that tab. $6,500 a day. Z? Not one lead pipe has been removed and replaced yet.
Yeah. So, here we go, right? I can do whatever the hell I want, and if I get into trouble, I'm just going to pay off my attorney fees with other people's money. In fact, I'm going to use the money from the people that I screwed in order to pay my legal fees.
Basically, that's exactly what happened.
Well, welcome to the U.S. of A., the greatest country in the world, folks.
And we'll leave it there for today. Again, we'll bookend this. Let's remind people where we're at, signing up for the newsletter, how to like us on Facebook, all that stuff, and especially supporting us financially.
Yeah, head over to tnztalk.com. You can find everything about us, the links to our Patreon page, the links to iTunes, how to rate us, how to review us. please do that. iTunes is incredibly important for podcasters like us. The more reviews and stars and 5 stars we get, the more attention it draws to the show. The more people we get, the more possibility of people donating, and the greater chance we have of continuing to do this every day.
Absolutely. All right, well, that is going to do it for us today. We survived my technical challenges, which is a good thing. In the meantime, you've got all the information. Do the right thing. Send some shekels our way. For Richard Zombeck, I'm Tony Trupiano. Have a great day. We'll be back with a podcast tomorrow. And in the meantime, and as always, we ask that you be well.
Oh, yeah. Can you feel it? Just over the credits, just riffing now. Words and chords. Not the poetry and the real thing, but not bad for an ad-lib. Not good, but... And it's not long enough, so just do a little bit more. And that's nearly done. That's the final credit there. That's the end.